What's up everyone, Landon here with Late Model Restoration. This video will cover my overview and install on Ford Performance's heavy duty axle shaft upgrade kit designed for all 2015 to 2017 S550 Mustangs. With the return of the IRS in the S550 Mustang, there was obviously some concern with how much power the factory axle shafts are going to be able to hold. Well, when the new S550 cars were released, bolt-on GTs with a sticky tire were totally trashing the factory shafts. Industry leader Ford Performance does have a solution. It's their heavy-duty axle shaft upgrade kit designed for all S550 Mustangs. This upgrade kit is a direct replacement and doesn't require any vehicle modifications. Each half shaft features severe-duty serviceable CV joints with CNC billet centers that can support up to 1,500 horsepower. Both shafts are going to be CNC machined from Aerospace high alloy materials and will have billet one-piece 34 spline inner and 32 spline outer stub ends. New C-clips come pre-installed as well as new shaft to spindle retaining nuts. Each shaft is then finished off in a blue powder coat for corrosion protection. Alright fellas, follow along as I walk you through my detailed steps on installing these half shafts into your S550 Mustang. To begin, support the car via a lift or get it as high as you can if you're working off a jack stands. Go ahead and remove both rear wheels. Remove the wire grommet from the parking brake cable bracket. Remove the 10mm bolt securing the parking brake cable bracket to the spindle. Remove the 8mm bolt securing the wheel speed sensor to the spindle and position it out of your way. Now remove the brake hose bracket from the sway bar end link. Reinstall a lug to secure the brake rotor. Remove the caliper to caliper bracket by removing the two 14mm bolts. Go ahead and tie the caliper up out of the way, securing it with a zip tie. Now you can remove the caliper bracket and set it aside by removing the two 18mm bolts. Now you can remove the lug, followed by the brake rotor. Use a dead blow to free the rotor if it puts up a fight. Remove the spindle nut with a 6.1 1/4 inch socket. Loosen and remove the toe link to spindle bolt with an 18mm socket. Loosen and remove the vertical link to lower control arm bolt with a 15mm socket. Remove the lower control arm to spindle bolt with a 21mm socket. Lastly, remove the upper control arm to spindle hardware. Use a 15mm box end wrench on the bolt head and an 18mm deep socket on the nut. With the spindle now free, lightly tap the axle shaft with the dead blow to free it from the spindle. In our case, the axle shaft was difficult to remove with just the light tap from the dead blow. Reinstall a few of the previously removed bolts. You'll want to thread them in a few turns. Utilizing a 3-jaw puller, position it onto the hub. Keep the hub from rotating by using a pry bar while you turn the 3-jaw puller. Rotate the puller shaft until the factory axle shaft is completely pressed out of the spindle. Remove any bolts you put back into place while you pressed out the axle shaft. Now remove the spindle and 3-jaw puller assembly from the car. Position a pry bar on the rear end casting and then pry out on the axle shaft flange. Once the C-clip is removed, slide the factory axle shaft out of the car. Have a rag ready just in case any fluid runs out. Before continuing, verify on the factory axle shaft that the C-clip came out with the shaft. If not, take a look inside the rear end housing and fish it out. Go ahead and inspect the new Ford Performance shaft for any visible tears in the CV boots. Remove the provided nut and set it aside. Make sure the C-clip is pre-installed and then lube those splines with the correct rear end gear oil. Also ensure that you have the correct axle shaft for the side you're working on. Slide the axle shaft into the rear end housing until it fully seats. Once seated, lightly pull on the inner part of the shaft to make sure the C-clip is locked into place. Apply some anti-seize to the splines that will slide into the spindle. Position the spindle onto the axle shaft. Apply blue thread locking compound to all the previously removed factory bolts. Loosely tighten and then preload the suspension. Torque the lower control arm to spindle bolt to 203 pound-feet. Torque the toe link to spindle bolt to 129 pound-feet. Torque the vertical link to lower control arm hardware to 129 pound-feet. Torque the upper control arm to spindle hardware to 76 pound-feet. Once you have all your factory bolts torqued to spec, you can now remove your jack or pole jack that had the suspension preloaded. Now you can apply blue thread locking compound to the axle shaft threads. Use the provided nut and torque in 2 stages. The first stage is going to be 98 pound-feet, and then the second stage is rotate an additional 45 degrees. Reinstall the brake rotor and use a lug to help hold it in place. Go ahead and cut the zip tie, holding up the caliper. Reposition the caliper onto the rotor. Apply blue thread locking compound to those bolts, and you're going to torque those to 129 pound-feet. Position the wheel speed sensor into the spindle. Apply blue thread locking compound to the bolt and torque to 80 inch-pounds. Reinstall the parking brake cable bracket to the spindle. Apply blue thread locking compound to the bolt and torque it to 21 pound-feet. Slide the rubber grommet back onto the parking brake cable bracket. Reposition the brake hose bracket and retighten. Repeat these steps for the other side. Reinstall your wheels, go ahead and take the car for a quick test ride, and you're all finished. As far as installation goes, fellas, I'd set aside roughly 3 to 4 hours from start to finish. I would recommend assistance from a friend, as well as having a 3-jaw puller in your tool arsenal. Other than that, this install is straightforward and can be completed in the comforts of your own garage. One last thing before I turn you guys loose, one factory half shaft tips the scale at 20.7 pounds. The Ford Performance upgraded shaft is 9 pounds heavier, weighing in at 29.7 pounds. Do the math, and that's 18 pounds total of additional rotational weight. To see more videos covering Ford Performance products for your S550 Mustang, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already done so. Of course, be sure and pick up this Ford Performance heavy duty axle shaft upgrade kit for your 2015 to 2017 S550 Mustang from the Real Mustang Enthusiasts, LMR.com.